you ever just had enough? Life gets so busy and you're tired and you just want to stay home and rest. But once you're home for a bit, the boredom starts. So you eat, watch a show, scroll on your phone, or grab the PlayStation controller. It sounds innocent enough, and it can be. But have you ever noticed that when you're tired, alone, and bored, your self-control button seems to just disable? You find yourself with a half bag of empty chips, gone in a flash, opening that third beer while you binge watch a show to the point where they start asking you, are you still watching? Scrolling on your phone has turned to buying or clicking into those sites that you just find randomly, but just can't seem to leave. We find ourselves saying, why do I do what I don't want to do? If left unchecked, these simple time fillers can become habits or even addictions. So this is where we find King David. Time has passed, he's reigned over Israel, taken in Jonathan's son, and did what was right and just for his people. And after facing the Ammonites, which continues to be a long and drawn out fight, David opts out of going back into the battlefield when spring comes. Now I get it. He's about 50 years old at this point. He spent years alongside mighty men. So it's really not that surprising that he tells his commander to go ahead and take the men to war without him. But in his tired, bored, alone time, his self-control button completely malfunctions. And an issue that he's been challenged by over and over raises its head. And it creates quite the situation. You might have heard of it. It's one that involves sex, lies, and murder. Yeah, that one. It's the one that makes us question how in the world can David be called a man after God's own heart?
All right, well, welcome to week 8 of our series. If you're just joining us, we are in the middle of a series called Why Do I Do What I Do? That's a question that you may not verbalize, but you may ask yourself quite often. And we've hit a lot of different topics and a lot of different questions. By the way, we have communion being served today as part of our service. And so if you're watching online, I'm just going to say we'd love you to participate. Grab whatever you have, bread and juice, cracker, water, whatever you have. I will explain what this is if you've never participated in communion at the very end. And we invite you to participate. Everybody is welcome. But as we jump into week number 8, as you heard in the setup of the story, we're getting into an interesting story, and that's an understatement. Before we get to that, I think we all have things we do to relax, things that we do to get some downtime, things that we do to rest. But what do you do when you're bored and tired and alone? Those moments in life where the temptation meter is going up and your self-control is going down. That's a big, wide question and maybe many things are flying through your head as I ask that. But it could be really big things, or it could be things that seem pretty minor. When you find yourself bored and alone, and what do you use your time for? I mean, where does your focus go? Or what takes away your focus? I mentioned at the very beginning of the year, the first message of the year was around finding your word for the year. And I hope that you guys have gone on that journey to find what's that word that's going to be a reminder for you for whatever it is your goal is for this entire year. I shared at that time that my word was focus. That not because I have lack of focus, or maybe I do, but I wanted focus to be my word so that wherever I was, I would be present, that I would be in the moment. And one of the biggest things for me that takes away my focus is this device. Maybe you're like me. And because, it's a wonderful tool. A phone is a wonderful tool, and with the technology that we continue to have, you can do almost anything. You can stay connected with people. You can catch up with people. You can actually call people. I don't know if people use this for that anymore, but it's a phone. You can text people. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can do work on it. There's so many good things that have come with the technology that we have. But I also know for myself that it can be a time sucker. Because there are times where I mindlessly look at the screen and play games. I love playing all sorts of games, and pretty soon I've spent an hour or more just playing a game or surfing through social media or just looking at people's lives. I mean, you could spend, a long time and realize how much focus you've lost by doing that. And so somebody showed me this not too long ago, and I actually have done it, and that is that you can put limits on your phone to help bring alerts. And so this is what it looks like. And you can put limits specifically on certain apps. It doesn't limit the specific time. It doesn't just shut off. But if you plug in, for example, on your social media or games or other apps that you know are things that suck your time away, you can put a limit. Maybe it's you want to spend 30 minutes tops a day or an hour tops a day doing that. And when that timer hits, I get this alert, time limit. You've reached your limit on Instagram or whatever it is. It's the limit I've set. And it doesn't stop me because there's a question at the bottom. If I click OK, then I know I'm going to stop right there. Or I can push the button to ignore the limit. And then I usually have another question that follows. Do you want an extra 15 minutes? Do you want to ignore it for the day? But it's something there to alert me that this is something that I said I want to do, and it's reminding me of that, and now I've got a choice. Maybe you're like me, and it's sad that you need some sort of reminder of the things that you want to do. But when defenses are down, when boredom kicks in, when exhaustion is present, we often look for a way to entertain ourselves. Sometimes with the best intentions, and sometimes often with unintended results. And it got me wondering, wouldn't it be nice if we had these red flags, these limits, these warnings throughout our life as we ask some of the questions in the why do I do what I do? And today, the one that we're looking at is, why do I keep falling into the same sin? Oh, come on, Alex. I invited family and friends here today. Why are we got to talk about sin? I'll say that today we're not necessarily talking about sin. We're talking about temptation. Jesus was tempted. Temptation itself is not a sin, but temptation left unchecked can have damaging results. And as was set up in the beginning of the story, we're going to look at a very complicated story of David. That's who we've been studying in these scriptures. And this story exposes something that is at the root of David and his problem. The temptations that he continues to fall into, probably none greater than this one in this specific story, where he tests the limits. It's found in 2 Samuel chapter 11, and we're starting in verse 1. It says this: in the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, there's a clue, David sent Joab, that's his commander, and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Rabbah. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. Red flag. You see, in that day and time, kings would go out to war with their military. In fact, the best kings would go out and lead their military out into battle. And as we said before, as you heard Keontae say in the setup video, David's getting a little older. You know, he's pushing into his 50s. I know what that's like. He's getting older. Maybe he's tired. But he's not where he's supposed to be. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've been there where you've been restless and bored, or your connection to God is weak. Maybe you're even feeling a little bit rebellious. And you find yourself in a place where you shouldn't be. For you, that might be the liquor store. Could be the bakery. Could be a website. Could be a television show. It could be just a spirit of revenge. It could be just hanging out with trouble. It's those moments in life where you ask yourself, why am I here? And sometimes you ask yourself, why am I here again? Wouldn't it be great if we had a temptation alert that came up at that time like this? Temptation limit, you shouldn't be here. as we continue to move through this story, David hasn't sinned yet. I say yet. David is simply home alone and he's bored, but sin is right around the corner. The story continues in verse 2. It says, late one afternoon, after his midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of his palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. And he sent someone to find out who she was. Shouldn't be here. To be clear, this is late afternoon, probably means it's dusk. A lot of interpretation goes into this story of what was this woman doing, taking a bath out in the open. Understand that the palace probably stood high over the city. It says David's on the rooftop. It's nighttime. In that day, the bath was a mikvah. It was a hole in the ground that a person would step into and wash themselves off out in the open, in their home with walls around. But David's somewhere where he's not supposed to be. And to give you a little bit more context, in chapter 10, in the previous chapter, the Israelites have won a big victory over the Syrians. And now in chapter 11, they've won a big victory over the Ammonites. These are their enemies. And so we have a confident king who's alone. He's maybe bored. He's looking for maybe some excitement. What could possibly go wrong? Temptation is powerful, isn't it? Temptation will find you even if you're not looking for it. Temptation will find you if you want to be found. Temptation will find you if you're trying to hide from it. Temptation will find you again when you don't even know what's around. What do you do when temptation shows up? Here's what David did. David takes one teeny tiny, harmless, innocent step. He asks, who is she? Verse 3. His servant said, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Here's some more context for this story. David probably knows, very likely knows who she is. Eliam is one of his fiercest warriors. It's Bathsheba's father. Uriah is also a mighty warrior in David's army. It's a close friend. They're like brothers. And if you're watching this show on Netflix, you can kind of see what's coming. You know, it's those shows where you're saying, stop, don't do it. Where's this? Don't go forward. And everything in David is saying, go. That's how temptation works. And this story is easy to dismiss because I know some of you might be sitting here thinking, nah, Alex, that's not my problem. I don't have a wandering eye. I don't have a problem spying on people. I don't have that problem. But that's not the point. The point is that no matter your age, whether you're 8 or 14 or 25 or 40 or 60, everybody has a kryptonite. Everybody has something in them that says, I want that. Starts off when we're children. I want that toy. It continues as we get older, maybe when we're playing sports and we say, I want their spot. It happens at work as we look at things that are happening around us and we say, I want their role or I want their promotion. It can even happen in your personal life as you look around other people, especially scrolling on social media and you say, I want their life. Maybe you're immune to David's specific temptation, but none of us are immune to temptation. And it's in those moments where I wish this alert would pop up. Temptation limit, it's not yours. Sometimes it would be helpful to remind us of that. I mean, when we're healthy, we can learn to celebrate other people. We can learn to be satisfied with what we have and who we are and all those kind of things. But those things take maturity. Those things take willpower. How's your willpower? David's not so good. Verse 4. It says, then David sent messengers to get her. And when she came to the palace, he slept with her. And then she returned home. Let me unpack this again a little bit further. Notice that he sent plural messengers. Imagine if some palace guards or people came to Bathsheba's home and said, the king wants to see you. She might have been frightened. What happened? What happened to my husband? Has he been injured or has he been killed? What's going on here? And there's a lot of misconceptions that are often tied up into this story. And I want to address them very briefly because we can always read a lot more into the story, especially the things that we want to read. But this is a pretty complex story. And so there's 4 misconceptions, I think, that pop up when this story is told. One of the misconceptions is that Bathsheba seduced David. That's nowhere in the text. A lot of narrative on this story is that the blame should go to Bathsheba. Another narrative that's sometimes talked about comes from the word that come from this text and says that the messengers went to go get her. Some translations say they took her, and people imply that this was a forced situation, that David truly used force. That's also not in the text. Some people describe this as a consensual encounter between 2 people. Others play off a narrative that David used his kingly power to influence the situation. This is the messiness of the Bible. The Bible doesn't always give us a minute by minute detail of exactly what's happened, and so we have to be careful to read into more that's there. But what the story tells us specifically, what the Bible says, is that it strongly condemns David. His sin is the focus. And there's a lesson to learn here in this story. When temptation turns into sin, often our reaction is to blame others. Often our reaction is to deflect. Often our reaction is to try to hide from accountability. We're going to see all of those things play out in David's story. But where does that get us? It's usually more trouble. Verse 5. I'm sure this didn't happen like verse 4, verse 5. I mean, this is taking some time. But it says in verse 5, it says, later, when Bathsheba discovered that she was pregnant, she sent David a message saying, I'm pregnant. Uh-oh. It's important to know here is this was a big risk on her part. Jewish law would tell them that both of these people should be put to death. And so Bathsheba is taking a huge risk in this moment by even exposing this. She's putting her own life at risk. She's putting David's life at risk. And so David has now an opportunity. He's got a chance. He's got a choice to make. What do I do in this moment? Do I try to make this right with God? Do I confess what I've done? Do I repent? Do I try to make this right with Uriah, my friend? As painful as it is, as uncomfortable as it is, David's got a choice. And then we see these words in verse 6. It says, David sent word to Joab, that's his commander, send me Uriah the Hittite. Okay. Maybe David's going to make a good choice here. Maybe David is going to confess. As hard as the conversation may be, maybe he's going to explain or try to explain or try to make things right. But as the story continues, David unleashes a plan. If I can just get Uriah to come back home from the battlefield and spend some time with his wife, wink, wink, maybe her honor could be saved. Maybe my sin could be hidden. If I could just get him home. You ever been there? You ever tried to fix a mess that you've gotten into, and by fix I mean hide it? Have you ever tried to continue the web of sin and temptation just gets a hold of you and it starts to get away? It's at those moments, again, that we need one of those temptation limits that tells us, you can't fix this. You can't fix this. As much as you try to fix it and hide it, it's probably going to get worse. Rarely does it work. Rarely does, as we continue to hide sin or try to cover up the things or try to fix the mistakes we make with bad intentions, rarely does it ever work. There's a British saying, in for a penny, in for a pound. I've gone this far. I've already screwed this up. What's one more sin? What would be worse? Doing something else wrong or people finding out what I've done? Maybe you've wrestled with that before. I'm striking a chord with myself too. Ever since the first sin in the garden, shame has tried to hide our sin from God. There's something inside of us where we feel so shameful about some of the things that we do that we think hiding it is the solution or trying to fix it. But rarely does it ever do it. Even if you hide it, doesn't it eat away at you? I know for some of you, for me, there's just some things that if you just let it fester inside, it haunts you. Verse 11. David's going to learn a lesson here. When David heard that Uriah had gone home, he summoned him and asked, "What's the matter? Why didn't you go home last night after being away for so long?" So he sends him over. He unleashes his plot, and he finds out that Uriah doesn't even have any interest in going home. Uriah replied, "The ark, this is the ark of the covenant, and the armies of Israel and Judah are living in tents. And Joab, my commander and master's men, are camping in the open field. How could I go home to wine and dine and lie with my wife? I swear that I would never do such a thing." Uriah is a man who's loyal and has integrity. So David goes a little deeper. He tries to get him drunk. He gets him drunk and he encourages him. This is in the Bible, by the way. He gets him drunk. He's trying to urge him to go home and be with his wife because of these things that he's trying to hide. And David realizes Uriah is more loyal drunk than David is sober. Doesn't work. I'm fast forwarding into the story because David is about to go a little deeper. And he writes a letter to the commander. And he asks Uriah to bring it to the commander. And it's a letter that says this. The letter instructed Joab, "Station Uriah at the front lines where the battle is fiercest, then pull back so that he will be killed. In for a penny, in for a pound." Isn't this the hero that slayed Goliath? Isn't this the guy who penned the words, "You lead me by still waters and anoint my head"? Isn't this the guy that we read about and talked about in previous weeks that had the opportunity to kill King Saul and had too much integrity and honor to do that? Isn't this the man that the Bible says was a man after God's own heart? It's amazing. How did he get here? From walking on the top of a palace, looking over, kind of just bored, to somebody's death. Uriah gets killed in this story. You see how the web of temptation continues to get a hold of him? He's ignoring all the warning limits. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't try to fix this. But David's like us. Temptation is powerful. Temptation gets the best of us. It said that Father Time is undefeated. Father Sin is heavyweight champion. I'll tell you that. It gets all of us. As the story continues, again, fast forwarding on a little bit more, David ends up marrying Bathsheba. She has a son, and David is feeling like he's gotten away with it. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe there's something inside of you that just feels like I've done a good job hiding this. Nobody knows. That's when we need one of these temptation limits to go off again that reminds us there are no secrets. There are no secrets. Chapter 11 ends like this: but the Lord was displeased with all that David had done. I know we don't like to think about it, but there is no secrets with God. As much as we hide it, as much as we think that nobody knows, I mean, sometimes it's something we don't want to think about, but God knows. And David's sin is about to get exposed. In the story, a prophet by the name of Nathan, who's a servant in David's kingdom, gets word from the Lord to tell David a story. He tells him a parable. Jesus told a lot of stories. Their parable is simply just a story, an illustration to make a point. And it's found now in 2 Samuel chapter 12. It says this: Nathan said, so the Lord sent Nathan the prophet to tell David this story. There were two men in a certain town. One was rich and one was poor. The rich man owned a great many sheep and cattle. The poor man owned nothing but one little lamb he had bought. He raised that little lamb and it grew up with his children. It ate from the man's own plate and drank from his cup. He cuddled it in his arms like a baby daughter. And one day, a guest arrived at the home of the rich man. But instead of killing an animal from his own flock or herd, he took the poor man's lamb and killed it and prepared it for his guest. David was furious. As surely as the Lord lives, he vowed, any man who would do such a thing to die deserves to die. He must repay 4 lambs to the poor man for the one he stole and for having no pity. Nathan said to David, you are that man. Dun, dun, dun. Gut punch. As much as David thought he was in the clear, maybe, as much as he thought he hid it, as much as he thought there were no secrets, David truly sees all the things that he had done. And in the story, David truly repents. It's in those moments maybe when we're in the deepest of valleys where we realize we've created a web and a mess and all those things that we truly understand and truly have some heartbreak of what we've done, that we truly repent. And David truly repents. How do we know? Because he pens these words in this time in Psalm 51. Listen as some of our confirmation students this year read it to us.
Have mercy on me, O God, because of your unfailing love. Because of your great compassion, blot out the stain of my sins. Wash me clean from my guilt. Purify me from my sin.
Against you and you alone have I sinned. I have done what is evil in your sight.
You will be proved right in what you say, and your judgment against me is just. Purify me from my sins, and I'll be clean. Wash me, and I'll be whiter than snow.
Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. Do not banish me from your presence, and don't take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and make me willing to obey you. You do not desire a sacrifice, or I would offer one. You do not want a burnt offering.
The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit.
You will not reject a broken and repentant heart, O God.
David ends up paying a deep price for this entire story. In the story, he ends up losing the son that he had with Bathsheba. And it exposes this hard truth. Sin has consequences. It does. Sometimes it creates a mess for us. Sometimes we create a mess for others, then it tears us apart. Sometimes it affects the people we love. Sometimes it affects us personally as it eats at us inside. And so what's the lesson here in this story? Here's the good news. Yet God is merciful and full of grace. It's in those moments where we feel guilt and shame. It's in these moments where we've gone down the web, where we've exposed all the things, where we've followed temptation, where we've stepped into sin, that we need this notification. God's forgiveness limit is infinite. David is forgiven for all that he's done in this story. David's repentant heart is forgiven. And so maybe this story hit a chord for you. Maybe there's something that you are stuck in a cycle of, and you keep asking yourself, why do I fall into this over and over? Maybe it's the words that you say, maybe it's the things that you do, maybe it's the spirit behind it, but you keep asking yourself, why do I act this way when I wish I didn't? I want a limit on that. I want to be reminded of that, but I keep falling into this. Maybe you're in that cycle. Or maybe you're in a spot where there's something in your past that is continuing to gnaw from you, and you've repented, and you've said, I want to stop, and you have, but it's eating you up inside. And you're carrying that burden. You think as you walk around, as you sit in this place, everybody sees the scarlet letter. Everybody sees you that way, and you're carrying that burden. Or maybe it's just something that you haven't fallen into, but you're getting dangerously close. Your limit, you're testing it, you're towing the line. Temptation is not a sin. It's in those moments that we have to understand God's forgiveness limit is infinite. That doesn't give us permission to keep on sinning. But if this is something that you're struggling with and it's gotten a hold of you, no matter what it is for you, whether it's work or at school or in your personal life, the way you view the world, the way how you treat other people, what you wish you had, it's in these moments that it's an opportunity to ask, to confess to God, this is something, Lord, that I need lifted from me. I need help, and just need to ask. And it is freely given. Forgiveness has been freely given. It doesn't matter your past or your present, whatever you have done, whatever you carry, this is why Jesus came, to free you from the sins or from the chains of temptation that lead us to sin. And so all you have to do is freely ask. As we look at the rest of David's story and the things that followed, the goodness and the mercy of God, we see that David and Bathsheba have more children. Their son Solomon is going to grow to become the next king of Israel, a wise man, also broken and also tempted in many different ways. And we see their entire story played out all the way up through the story of Jesus. In fact, in Matthew chapter 1, it talks about the genealogy of where Jesus came. Many times we say he's a descendant of David, but right there in the story of Jesus, it says David's name, it says Bathsheba's name, and guess what? It also says Uriah's name to remind us that as broken as we may be, no matter how far we fall away, this is the reason that Christ came. This is the reason he gave his life, that while we were still sinners, Christ loved us and gave his life for us.